Analysis. Japan's Ministry of Defense confirmed on December 2, 2025, that a 100-kilowatt class high-energy laser system had been installed aboard the experimental test ship JS Asuka at the Ise shipyard. The system, in development since 2018 under Japan's Acquisition, Technology and Logistics Agency, combines domestically produced 10-kilowatt fiber lasers into a single focused beam housed in two 40-foot containerized units. Kawasaki Heavy Industries holds the production contract. Sea trials are scheduled to begin after February 27, 2026, with live fire tests against drone targets already under contract. The installation was confirmed by Naval News and Army Recognition and followed ground-based testing that verified the system's destructive capability against small drones and live mortar rounds. Atlas stated in program documentation that as long as sufficient electrical power is available, the system can continue engaging threats without depleting ammunition, a cost and logistics architecture fundamentally different from kinetic interceptor systems. The economic argument underlying the laser program is structural. A Patriot missile costs between $3 million and $4 million per shot. A Standard Missile 3 used for ballistic missile defense runs higher. Against an adversary planning to saturate the battle space with thousands of inexpensive drones and cruise missiles in a conflict's opening hours, a missile-based defense system has a fundamental resource constraint. Interceptor inventory is finite. A 100-kilowatt laser fires at the cost of electricity. The U.S. Navy has simultaneously forward-deployed the laser-armed destroyer USS Preble to Japan since October 2024. Equipped with a 60-kilowatt Helios system fully integrated into the Aegis combat management architecture. The United States and Japan are now operating directed energy weapon systems side by side in the Pacific. Japan's defense transformation. The scale. Japan's Ministry of Defense released its FY 2026 defense plan in late December 2025. Defense-related expenditures are set to rise to approximately 8.81 trillion yen, roughly $56 billion, representing approximately 2% of GDP. As reported by Army Recognition, Japan's defense spending has increased for 13 consecutive years. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi advanced the 2% GDP target by 2 full years ahead of the originally planned schedule. Since 1976, no Japanese cabinet had breached the 1% GDP ceiling established in the post-war constitutional framework. That ceiling has been removed. The procurement commitments behind the spending are specific. Japan signed a $1.7 billion contract with the United States government to acquire 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles, both Block 4 and Block 5 variants, each with a range of 1,600 kilometers. As reported by Naval News in January 2024, Japan's defense minister stated explicitly that the acquisition timeline had been accelerated in light of the increasingly severe security environment. By fiscal year 2025, 3 Japanese Aegis destroyers, Chokai, Haguro, and Kirishima, had been modified to launch Tomahawks. 2 more, Miyako and Otago, are being fitted in fiscal year 2026. Japan is simultaneously developing the improved Type 12 surface-to-ship missile in ground-launched, ship-launched, and submarine-launched variants. The ground-launched version, tested successfully in the United States in October 2024 and again in summer 2025, has a range exceeding 1,000 kilometers. As USNI News reported, deployment sites on Kyushu alone would place parts of China and North Korea within striking range. 2 separate hypersonic weapons programs are in development. The hypervelocity gliding projectile for island defense, which completed final test launches in summer 2025, and a separate hypersonic missile platform designed to operate above Mach 5. These systems are specifically designed to defeat the layered air defense architecture China has constructed around its naval task forces. The electromagnetic railgun program. ATLA conducted the world's first successful ship-mounted railgun firing test against a real ship target from June through early July 2025, as reported by Interesting Engineering. Japan's future 13 DDX destroyer class is planned to carry both railguns and high-powered lasers. According to Janes International, as reported by the National Interest, These systems would be capable of engaging high-speed incoming targets, including hypersonic weapons, firing railgun projectiles at Mach 6. If fielded as designed, a single destroyer would carry directed energy interception capability, hypersonic-class railgun projectiles, and conventional cruise missile armament. China's Taiwan timeline and the Davidson window. Former commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral Philip Davidson, assessed that China could be ready to pursue its Taiwan objective as early as 2027. That assessment, known as the Davidson window, has structured American and Japanese defense planning for years. Defense Priorities, a Washington-based research organization, notes that China currently maintains 134 air bases within 1,000 nautical miles of Taiwan, with approximately 650 hardened aircraft shelters operational. Taiwan's defense ministry has assessed the opening scenario of a potential full-scale Chinese military operation in specific terms: a simultaneous launch of between 5,000 and 10,000 missiles in the first hour, targeting radars, airfields, and command centers. A shock-and-awe opening designed to blind the island before any ground or amphibious operations begin. China's purpose-built arsenal for this mission includes the DF-15 and DF-16 short-range ballistic missiles targeted at Taipei and its surroundings, the CJ-10 low-flying cruise missile designed for terrain-following approach profiles, and the DF-21D, the anti-ship ballistic missile specifically engineered to engage U.S. aircraft carriers before they can close to weapons range. Taiwan's response has been structural rather than incremental. The island received its first Harpoon coastal defense systems in a package including 100 launchers and 400 land-based RGM-84L4 Harpoon Block II anti-ship missiles. These systems form the backbone of a new coastal warfare command scheduled to achieve full operational status on January 1, 2026. The command structure is designed for local response. When a Chinese missile is detected, local commanders engage without waiting for central authorization from Taipei. The Harpoon Block II missiles incorporate inertial and GPS navigation hardened for operation in electronic warfare environments, specifically the signal jamming conditions the PLA has trained to create. Russia's nuclear signaling in the Pacific. On August 19, 2025, Russia's Ministry of Defense confirmed that two Tu-95MS nuclear-capable strategic bombers, escorted by Su-35 and Su-30SM fighters, conducted a 6-hour patrol over the Sea of Japan. As reported by Army Recognition, the patrol was timed to coincide precisely with large-scale U.S.-South Korea joint military exercises. The timing was operationally deliberate. In January 2025, 4 Tu-95MS bombers had already conducted a patrol near Hokkaido, Japan's northern island. The Tu-95MS carries KH-101 nuclear-capable cruise missiles with ranges exceeding 2,500 kilometers, sufficient to strike anywhere in Japan without the aircraft leaving international airspace. Japan's Air Self-Defense Force scrambled F-15J interceptors to shadow the formation as it entered Japan's air defense identification zone. The strategic signal is unambiguous. Japan has provided billions in financial assistance to Ukraine, coordinated sanctions with the G7, and expelled Russian diplomats. Moscow is responding with nuclear-capable bomber patrols along Japan's northern perimeter, making explicit that Tokyo sits within range of nuclear-capable cruise missile systems and that Russian strategic aviation can reach any Japanese target without entering Japanese airspace. The Khabarovsk and the Poseidon deployment. On November 1, 2025, Russia launched the Khabarovsk, a Project 09851 nuclear-powered special-purpose submarine at the Sevmash shipyard in Severodvinsk. As detailed in the U.S. Naval Institute's Proceedings Journal in January 2026, the Khabarovsk was designed specifically to carry and deploy the Poseidon 2M39 nuclear torpedo, 6 autonomous nuclear-powered underwater drones per vessel, each between 20 and 25 meters long. The Poseidon operates at depths of up to 1,000 meters, at speeds estimated at 70 knots. In October 2025, President Putin personally announced a successful test of the Poseidon's nuclear power unit, stating that Russia had for the first time managed to launch it from a carrier submarine and activate its nuclear power unit under operational conditions. The Poseidon is not designed to destroy a ship. It is designed to destroy a coastline. Equipped with a nuclear warhead estimated between 2 and 100 megatons by various independent assessments, it is built to detonate near a shoreline and generate a radioactive tsunami capable of rendering coastal areas uninhabitable for decades. Russia is positioning this capability in the Pacific. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace noted in a January 2025 analysis that Russia's strategic nuclear modernization program has faced delays due to sanctions and component shortages, but the Khabarovsk launch on November 1, 2025, confirms the program is operational. Japan faces what defense analysts characterize as a two-front pressure campaign: China threatening from the south, Russia probing from the north with nuclear-capable aviation, and now nuclear-armed submarine systems. The alliance architecture widening. Japan's response operates within an expanding coalition whose formation has accelerated faster than any participant, including Washington, anticipated. Australia announced in August 2025 that it had ordered 11 improved Mogami-class frigates from Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. Australia is simultaneously building nuclear-powered submarines under the AUKUS agreement with the United States and United Kingdom. South Korea, despite decades of historically rooted tension with Japan, is forming closer security coordination with Tokyo against shared threats from North Korea and Russia. South Korea's KF-21 fighter program adds an additional highly capable regional platform to the alliance balance. The Philippines, which expelled U.S. military bases in 1991, has fundamentally reversed its strategic alignment. In April 2025, Reuters reported that Manila received a second batch of BrahMos supersonic anti-ship missiles from India. In February 2025, Naval News confirmed the Philippines announced plans to acquire submarines for the first time in the nation's history. Japan is in active informal consultations with Manila about potential export of Type 03 surface-to-air missile systems, which would extend the defensive network southward into the South China Sea. Japan has deployed medium-range surface-to-air missiles on Yonaguni Island, confirmed by Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi in November 2025. Placing Type 03 Chusam batteries on Japan's westernmost territory, 110 kilometers from Taiwan's eastern coast. Combined with PAC-3 Patriot units on Miyako Island and Aegis destroyers in adjacent waters, these systems create overlapping engagement zones from Taiwan to Okinawa. U.S. Marines equipped with anti-ship missiles are stationed across Okinawa's remote islands, turning the first island chain into what analysts describe as a fortified maritime barrier. The speed window narrowing. China's military planning for Taiwan, as analyzed by multiple Western defense research organizations, depends on speed. Beijing's assessment is that a prolonged conflict against the United States and Japan is unwinnable. Chinese industrial output depends on maritime trade, and a naval blockade sustained over months would be catastrophic. The operational doctrine that follows is to move with overwhelming speed, crush Taiwan's defenses within hours, establish control of the strait, and present the world with an irreversible fait accompli before American carrier groups can close to engagement range. Every new weapon system deployed against that timeline, every Tomahawk integrated into a Japanese destroyer, every laser system commissioned for sea trials, every harpoon battery positioned on Taiwan's coastline, every missile battery installed on Yonaguni, every marine anti-ship unit dug into Okinawa, adds time to China's required operational window. In a conflict against this coalition, extended operational time equals strategic failure. The 2023 CSIS Taiwan Contingency Wargame found that in a conventional conflict, the United States and its allies could prevent a successful Chinese amphibious invasion, but at significant cost. The study projected China would lose approximately 138 ships in a failed attempt. Japan's expanding arsenal, lasers, hypersonic weapons, tomahawks, railgun capability, is designed to make those Chinese losses more severe and achievable from longer standoff ranges that complicate Chinese targeting. Japan's constitutional transformation and its strategic implications. For 7 decades, Japan's defense posture was defined by Article 9 of its post-war constitution, which formally renounced the right of belligerency and prohibited maintaining war potential. The framework was treated for generations as foundational to Japan's international identity as a peaceful trading nation. Defense spending was capped at 1% of GDP. Japan's self-defense forces could defend Japanese territory. They could not strike targets outside Japan's borders. That framework has been systematically and deliberately dismantled since 2022. The acquisition of Tomahawk cruise missiles with a 1,600-kilometer range is the clearest single indicator. Japan now possesses the ability to hit targets deep inside adversary territory, while Japanese ships remain beyond the reach of adversary weapons. The legal reinterpretation that classifies this as standoff defense capability, the ability to defend Japan by striking the launch platforms threatening it, represents a doctrinal revolution as significant as any equipment acquisition. The Tomahawk acquisition was preceded by a 2015 reinterpretation of the Constitution that authorized Japan to exercise collective self-defense, the right to defend an ally under attack even when Japan itself is not directly targeted. That reinterpretation, combined with the current equipment programs, means Japan's self-defense forces have moved from a purely reactive territorial defense posture to a posture that can project offensive capacity at strategic range. The political sustainability of this transformation depends on the continued public perception that the threat environment justifies it. The Tu-95MS patrols near Hokkaido, the Khabarovsk's launch and the Poseidon tests, China's 134 air bases and their hardened shelters within 1,000 nautical miles of Taiwan, and North Korea's continued ballistic missile testing have maintained a threat environment that gives successive Japanese cabinets the political space to continue the buildup. Prime Minister Takaichi's decision to accelerate the 2% GDP target by 2 years was not opposed on national security grounds. The information and electronic warfare dimension. China is not a passive observer of Japan's buildup. Beijing has been systematically gathering intelligence on the electronic architectures of Taiwan, Japan, and U.S. forces in the Pacific as preparation for the disruption campaign that Chinese military doctrine indicates would precede any kinetic operation. Drone incursions near Taiwanese radar installations, ships conducting surveys of undersea cable routes, and electronic warfare exercises timed to coincide with U.S.-Japan joint drills have all been documented. Chinese military doctrine explicitly prioritizes blinding the adversary, destroying or jamming radar coverage, severing communications, disrupting command and control networks, before firing any kinetic weapon. The objective is to create a period of paralysis in which defenders cannot rapidly assess what is happening and generate an appropriate response. Taiwan's 2025 Hongguang military exercises, as described by Focus Taiwan in April 2025, explicitly trained against this threat. The exercises simulated a scenario in which China began military operations by disguising forces as civilian vessels, sand dredgers, and commercial shipping, triggering gray zone ambiguity in the period before hostilities officially commenced. Taiwan practiced identifying and responding to these deceptions at speed, under the decentralized response doctrine that the new Coastal Warfare Command is designed to operationalize. Japan's laser and railgun programs are relevant to this electronic warfare dimension in a specific way. Directed energy systems are less vulnerable to electronic jamming than missile systems with complex guidance architectures. A laser fires in a straight line at the speed of light. It does not require GPS or inertial navigation that can be spoofed. A railgun projectile, once fired, follows physics rather than programmable guidance. These systems' resistance to electronic warfare interference is one of their operational advantages in an environment where China's opening hours electronic warfare campaign is specifically designed to defeat the guidance systems of existing missile-based defenses. The Japan-South Korea coordination dimension. South Korea's emergence as a closer security partner with Japan represents one of the most strategically significant bilateral developments in the Pacific in decades. Historical grievances rooted in the Second World War, comfort women, forced labor, colonial-era injustices, have been a persistent barrier to deep defense cooperation between the two countries for 80 years. The shared threats from North Korea's missile program, China's expanding naval presence, and Russia's nuclear signaling have produced the political conditions for coordination that historical grievances previously made impossible. The coordination is currently primarily conducted through trilateral mechanisms with the United States rather than direct bilateral Japan-South Korea defense agreements. But its practical expression, intelligence sharing, coordinated exercise timing, South Korean participation in Quad-adjacent discussions, represents a foundation for deeper integration that the current threat environment is likely to accelerate. South Korea's KF-21 program and Japan's next-generation fighter development with Italy and the United Kingdom are proceeding on parallel timelines, and the prospect of coordinated employment doctrine for both platforms is being discussed at the operational planning level. The significance for China's planning is direct. A coordinated Japan-South Korea defense response, combined with U.S. Marine anti-ship missile systems across the first island chain, Australian nuclear submarines patrolling the Indo-Pacific, Philippine BrahMos coastal defense, and Taiwan's Coastal Warfare Command, creates a military problem for Chinese operational planners that is qualitatively different from the one they would face against any single adversary or even any two-country coalition. The Blitzkrieg doctrine, speed, shock, fait accompli before the coalition can respond, requires a window of operational freedom that this multilateral architecture is specifically designed to deny. The trajectory to 2027 and beyond. The Davidson window closes with the passing of 2027, but the strategic competition does not. Japan's next-generation fighter, developed with Italy and the United Kingdom and targeting deployment in 2035, represents the long-term aviation backbone that will replace Japan's aging F-15 fleet. The 13 DDX destroyer class carrying railguns, lasers, and hypersonic interceptors is being actively designed with a fielding timeline that extends beyond the current decade. The ATLA programs, lasers, railguns, hypersonic weapons, are building toward a 2030s force that will be qualitatively different from Japan's current one. China is aware of this trajectory, and Beijing's defense industrial buildup is not standing still. The PLA Navy has been commissioning Type 055 destroyers, Type 075 amphibious assault ships, and submarine platforms at a rate that exceeds any Western Navy's current construction tempo. The competition is not static. Both sides are building toward future force structures, while the current systems define the immediate deterrence equation. What has changed irreversibly since 2022 is the political architecture. Japan's 1% ceiling is gone. Japan has counterstrike capability in Tomahawk-equipped destroyers. South Korea and Japan are coordinating. Australia is building nuclear submarines and buying Japanese frigates. The Philippines has reversed its basing posture. Taiwan's Coastal Warfare Command is operational, and the U.S. Marine anti-ship missile batteries are permanent fixtures across the first island chain. The democratic security architecture in the Pacific is not complete, but it is no longer aspirational. It is operational, growing, and being tested through regular exercises in the same waters where a Taiwan conflict would be decided. The closing window paradox. Military analysts assessing Chinese strategic doctrine have identified a structural paradox in the deterrence architecture being assembled. Beijing operates on a logic of closing opportunity. As Japan grows stronger, as Taiwan becomes harder to crack, and as the U.S. deepens its Pacific commitment, the window for a quick, decisive operation narrows. A narrowing window does not necessarily produce patience. It can produce urgency, the impulse to act before the deterrent architecture fully materializes. CSIS analysis published in late 2025 concluded that China's strategy of keeping Indo-Pacific democracies fragmented and mutually suspicious is failing. Rather than preventing coalition formation, China's military buildup and Russia's nuclear intimidation campaign have accelerated the democratic convergence that Beijing most needed to prevent. Historical wounds between Japan and South Korea that persisted for 80 years are being actively managed through strategic coordination driven by shared assessments of threats from Pyongyang, Beijing, and Moscow. The OTS Secretary General's Washington visit, Australia's Japanese frigate order, the Philippines submarine program, Taiwan's Coastal Warfare Command going operational, Japan's 13 consecutive years of defense spending increases. Each individually represents a response to a specific threat. Together, they represent a democratic security architecture in the Pacific that is hardening faster than China or Russia's planning assumptions had anticipated. The question that Beijing's strategic planners must now answer in operational terms is whether the destruction of the PLA Navy required to force Taiwan's capitulation against this coalition remains an acceptable price. That calculation is being revised every time Japan's JS Asuka conducts a laser firing test, every time a Tomahawk is integrated into a Japanese Aegis destroyer, and every time Taiwan's decentralized coastal warfare command practices its response protocols.